Peace be upon you and God's mercy and blessings. Unlike most animals, snakes do not have an external ear, and this gives people the right to say that snakes do not hear. But despite this, if you try to make a loud sound next to any snake or something lying on the ground next to it, you will notice that the snake responds to the sounds and pays attention to them. It is very normal. In fact, sometimes we see people playing with snakes using a flute, and this is a very common practice in India and East Asian countries. The man starts blowing into the flute, and the snake comes out of the box and starts dancing. I wonder how this happens when it does not have an ear. The external shape of the snake's head, and it doesn't have an external ear or an opening through which it can hear. Not only did people deceive their uncles into believing that snakes don't hear, but even scientists themselves, over hundreds of years, believe that snakes don't hear. The translation of this was simply that they don't have an eardrum like most creatures, such as lizards, for example. Although they don't have a prominent external ear like humans, if you look closely at their shape, you will find that there is a small hole or opening through which they can hear. But even this hole doesn't exist in snakes. The snake's head has no opening at all. So does the snake not hear? Right. In reality, no. Snakes do have an ear and they hear very normally, but the whole idea is in the nature of the ear itself. If we take humans, for example, we will find that the ear consists of three main parts: an external ear, a middle ear, and an inner ear. The sound initially begins to collect in the external ear, which is a small channel through which sound waves pass. The sound is then amplified and the sound is transmitted through a cavity that connects the outer ear and the inner ear, which is the middle ear. After that, the sound waves are transmitted to the middle ear and travel through the air in this cavity until they reach the eardrum, where small bones and fine hairs move in order to eventually be transformed into a nerve signal that makes its way to the brain to be translated in the end into the sound that we hear. In snakes, the matter is a little different. The snake has only one part of the three parts that we talked about, which is the inner ear. The inner ear of the snake is a complete ear that is not connected to any of the traditional hearing aids that collect sound waves from the air. Its inner ear is directly connected to the jaw bones that are based on the ground and are also connected to all the bones spread throughout the snake's body and the spinal cord. These bones are the means that transmit sound waves from outside and deliver them to the inner ear, and this which in turn makes the snake as if it hears from every part of its body, and this is because the receptors, which are bones in this case, are present in all parts of the body, and this strange structure, glory be to God, makes the snake feel any vibration that occurs in the ground, in the sand, or even in the rocks. The snake, while lying on the ground, the vibrations are transmitted from the ground and reach its body, and from there to the bones and spinal nerves, which ultimately reach the inner ear and from there to the brain, so that the snake can ultimately recognize the sounds. Now a question arises, since snakes hear when they touch the ground through the vibrations that travel through it, can they also hear sounds that travel through the air like humans? Some studies have shown that the skin and muscle tissues of snakes can also sense waves carried through the air, and these waves or vibrations are also transmitted to the inner ear. It is very normal, and there are a very large number of snake breeders who believe that their snakes pay attention and philosophize about this as well. However, it is preferable that the formation of the inner ear of snakes is not effective in hearing sounds that travel through the air clearly, of course, compared to its efficiency in hearing sounds that travel through the ground. However, snakes hear a small range of sound frequencies, which usually fall between 80 Hz and 160 Hz. This, of course, represents a very small part compared to the wide frequency that humans hear, which ranges from 20 Hz to 21,000 Hz. For this reason, some researchers liken the ability of snakes to hearing the sounds where one diving under the water and one standing outside and talking. Yes, he is not able to distinguish the details of the speech exactly, but somehow he is able to hear it. The strangest thing is that snakes usually do not hear each other's voices. I mean, the hissing or the scary sound that the snake makes through its mouth. The snakes around it usually do not hear it clearly like we hear it, because it is usually of a high frequency for them. If you are wondering now, how do they communicate with each other? Snakes do not communicate with each other through hissing. In fact, they do not need this hissing sound. There is nothing at all. They can sense everything around them by touching the ground. The main purpose of the hissing, or the sounds they make, is to scare birds and other predatory mammals. Now that we know how the snake hears, and it does not have ears. Let us explain the subject of the snake charmer who makes the snake dance. With the flute, as most of us have seen before, there is a person sitting on the ground holding a flute in his hand and blowing into it, and in front of him is a basket with a snake in it. As soon as he starts blowing, the snake starts coming out of it, and we feel that it is dancing to the sounds of the music, but there is something that we explained a while ago, that the sounds that are of high frequency do not reach the snakes at all, and when they do reach them, they are distorted and weak. And the sound of this flute has a high frequency. How did the snake or the serpent come out dancing to the music? Mostly, the music that is being played at this time does not affect the snake at all. Its purpose is to excite the people watching the show and create an atmosphere, meaning here a second question arises. Since the music is not what moves the snake or attracts its attention, what makes it move? What makes it dance? In every place, if you focus on any of these shows, you will notice that the person sitting is always moving his hand and body while blowing the flute, and he even moves the flute itself in front of the snake. Right and left, and the amazing thing is that these movements are what excite the snake, not the sound of the music or anything. All that happens is that the snake imitates the person in front of it. Snakes are one of the animals that have the ability to acquire skills and training from humans, and for this reason some sleight of hand players use snakes in their tricks. What also helps them with this is the innate nature of snakes in monitoring, observing, and moving in front of targets. For this reason, the swaying of the snake, or viper in front of the person holding the flute to the right and left is something that is taught to the snake and is not a result of music at all. If the person playing the flute hid behind a tree and started playing, the snake would remain standing in place and not move. On the contrary, if someone stood in front of the snake and moved his hand to the right and left like the musician does without making any sound, the snake would start swaying in front of him to the right and left.